Welcome to Talking Beats with Daniel Lelchuk. We hope you'll subscribe and give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Now, if you like the show, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/talkingbeats. That's patreon.com/talkingbeats. We believe now more than ever in providing a platform for individuality, free thought, and a diverse range of views. By supporting the show this way, you'll get early access to episodes, bonus episodes, and much, much more. Remember, the conversation is always active at Talking Beats Podcast on social media. Here's Daniel Lelchuk.
On today's program, inventor, entrepreneur, and philanthropist Jim McKelvey. Along with his friend Jack Dorsey, he is the co-founder of Square, the small white credit card reader that you've doubtless encountered at a farm stand or coffee shop that enables small merchants to take payment via credit card. In 2016, McKelvey founded Invisibly, an ambitious project to rewire the economics of online content. He's recently out with a book, The Innovation Stack, Building an Unbeatable Business One Crazy Idea at a Time. And he's also deeply passionate about glassblowing and more broadly the intersection of the arts and other fields, which I'd say makes him fit in quite well on this program. Jim McKelvey, who is also independent director of the St. Louis Federal Reserve, joins me now, and I'm happy he's here. Give a sort of framework. So people have this idea about what an inventor is. There's this mythical thing. It's sort of like what is a philosopher. It really exists, and you are one. So what happens when you're a kid? You look around thinking that's cool, I want to make something, or is there a spark? Obviously, with Square, which we can talk about, it was something that you felt was needed and wasn't around. But what about as a kid? What's that passion?
Well, I've always liked making things. I don't know that I was ever an inventor, but I always made things. I had a business making skateboards when I was in grade school. I'd make skateboards and sell them to my friends. I would, build things in high school and college, and I started blowing glass in college, so I became sort of a glass blower after I graduated. And I was literally in the studio today. I was in the wood shop this weekend. I like making things. It's just fun for me. And I don't know that that's necessarily the roots of invention, but I've also over time gotten less uncomfortable with not knowing how to do something. So I won't say that I'm comfortable not knowing what I'm doing, but it's sort of familiar to me to find a problem and say, well, I've never done this before, but it's got to be doable.
It's interesting. You talk about sort of artistic hands-on things, woodworking and all the work with glass that you do. How compatible is all that with the digital world that we live in?
It's wonderfully compatible. In my world, I love making things physically because it tells me things that my tech side doesn't tell me. So I have a degree in economics. I have a second degree in computer engineering. So by training, I guess you would say I would be somebody who just works with numbers or, lines of code. But I find that sort of boring. I do like playing with it a little bit, but, a couple hours a day and I'm done. Whereas I can spend, 8 hours working in essentially a factory-like setting and really feel happy about it. So I like moving. I like building things. I like stuff that's exploding and like right now, I've been just obsessively building these whiskey glasses, and they are really difficult to make. They're just insanely difficult to make. I've spent, probably 4 months trying to make these things, and I still haven't gotten the perfect one yet.
Okay, so why are they difficult to make, and what should we be picturing? I'm picturing a heavy rocks glass.
Yeah, it's a heavy rocks glass, but the sides are wavy, so you can't really drink out of them easily. You have to pay attention when you drink. So you can't absentmindedly. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not trying to sell these things. Okay, I'm just saying that like they are, they require your focus. They take your attention back from the surroundings and put it back in your hand. And so I've been playing with these things, and it's really a wonderful experience to be forced to pay attention to the thing that you're doing. Because, hell, even my car drives itself now. Like, I don't even have to pay attention when I'm driving down the street. I guess I should be, but, technically, the car's got it, So I've tried to go the other way and make something that literally demands your attention. And I'm having a lot of fun with it.
So is there any chance I can get one, maybe under the table or something?
Yeah. I'll send you one. I mean, email my assistant, and but you got to give me your opinion. I'll send you one, and then you got to go, oh, these are a total pain in the ass. But
look, I'll give an unvarnished, rose-colored glass opinion to you. Absolutely. So let's talk just for a minute about Square. We don't need to focus the whole time because it's sort of, you talked a lot about it, and people can find you about Square in many different places. But just so people who are listening, in case they're unfamiliar, this is the plastic square that you have probably used to pay for a coffee at a little coffee shop on the corner. It plugs into an iPhone, and you swipe the credit card through it, and that is what Square is. And I love the name, too, because it is a square.
Yes, it's a square, and it came from the phrase fair and square. That's how Jack and I came up with it. Although our original name was Squirrel, so we thought Squirrel would be a good name for a payments company, but it was already taken, so we stumbled on Square, and we thought that was even better. That's what the company started out as. And when I was there full-time, that's what we were building. But since then, we've morphed into this whole payments ecosystem, and now we have Cashapp, and I guess we also have Tidal, so we're a music company as well now. But the beginning was very humble. It was me in my studio trying to get paid, and I couldn't. And I was already going to start a company with Jack Dorsey. Jack's a buddy of mine. We worked together at a computer company that I have. And he asked me to start a company with him, and we didn't have an idea until I lost that sale in my studio, and that became Square.
It's kind of amazing because people in sort of artistic fields like I am, we have the burden of history. We have the burden of hundreds of years of music, and when you go on stage to play a Mozart symphony, it's thrilling every time because it's old music that seems so fresh and relevant now. But we have the tradition weighing on our shoulders, and I mean that in a good way. And so we're not always thinking about what can be improved. What can you improve from a Bach choral fugue? And probably nothing. But here you are with a real practical problem, and we all have practical problems, as you write about very articulately. It is a great book, by the way. Just in case people are not aware, the book sort of hanging over this whole thing is called The Innovation Stack: Building an Unbeatable Business One Crazy Idea at a Time. And as you write about in the book, we all have problems, and the world is filled with problems, and you have this wonderful way of looking at this possibility of there being solutions, perfect problems. Can you talk about this?
Well, so I was interested in focusing on this area that I'd never heard discussed, and that was sort of the whole reason for writing the book, because I felt like I wanted somebody to have told me this stuff 20 years ago. I felt like life would have been a lot easier if I'd known some of the things. And so I needed to separate the world into the stuff that we kind of know and have already talked about, and this stuff that we weren't talking about. And it turns out one of the reasons we weren't talking about it was because we didn't have a word. So the word entrepreneur, I had to use an archaic definition to even have a conversation. But then the question was, well, what do entrepreneurs do? Like, what are people who are building solutions that have not existed before doing? And so I thought, well, let's take the focus of a problem and divide the world into problems. You have all the problems in the world, and some of them are solved and some of them are unsolved. So if I have a flat tire, I mean, that's a solved problem. We know how to fix a flat tire. So is an insurance company. Like if you want to start an insurance company, people have started an insurance company, and you can start an insurance company. And if you don't know how to start an insurance company, you can hire people who've started insurance companies or work for insurance companies. So, those are solved problems.
I've always wanted to start an insurance company. I thank
there you go.
So much for the reminder.
And we got a long weekend coming up, so like go for it, right?
What have I been doing?
but the point is, there's a whole world of problems that have not been solved, and that range of problems is more interesting to me. But then I had to subdivide that into sort of the solvable problems and the unsolvable problems. Like right now, we don't know how to live on Mars. Like maybe we'll solve that someday. Right now, we can't live on Mars, not that I'd want to, but there are a bunch of unsolvable problems. But then there are problems that are solvable, but they haven't been solved yet. And I call those perfect problems. So these are the ones that if you want to, you could be the first to solve. You could be the first person to figure out how to do that thing. And so that's the focus of the book. The focus of the book is these perfect problems. And that, I think, is what happened to Square, although quite accidentally. And it turns out it happened to hundreds of other companies, all of whom had this weird trajectory. They started off sort of run by people who didn't know anything. There were no experts here. And they started working on these unsolved problems, came up with a unique solution, which in my world sort of creates this thing called an innovation stack, which I guess we can talk about later or not. But then they rise to this level of, in many cases, world dominance. They become the biggest firms in the world doing the thing that they're doing. And in all cases, they're wildly successful. And I was like, wait a second, there's a pattern here, but it's a different pattern than I'd been taught. Like I'd always been taught that the entrepreneurs and the titans of industry were these, people who were somewhat better than me. They were smarter or younger or stronger, or, they had perfect pitch, or I don't know, like there was always something that they had that I did.
I can provide the perfect pitch.
You've got perfect pitch?
You bet.
Oh my God. I'm so jealous. That is, oh, you don't know.
For the people who don't know, the perfect pitch is when you can both pick out notes and name them from hearing them, or you can produce them yourself. If you say sing an E flat, I'll sing an E flat, and it'll be what the piano keyboard will tell you is an E flat, and the tuner will tell you is an E flat, and all that. And funnily, I had a good friend in Boston where I used to do youth orchestra. I'd go down from New Hampshire every weekend to do lessons in all the youth orchestras around Boston, and we'd sit together at the piano, and he had incredible perfect pitch. There are different levels. I think his maybe even better. And we would sit and play these ridiculously complicated chords. It's like slam our two elbows down,
sure.
Play as many notes as and see how many you can pick out. It is a great way to spend a Saturday evening.
Well, if you can do it. That's
if you can do it.
Yeah, like for the rest of us, like
For the rest, you just sit in the corner paying attention to the whiskey glass.
Yes, you just lament in my whiskey glass. But that's the story. So like people like me shouldn't go into music because we don't have perfect pitch. And I think I think the answer is, at least in the world that I was studying, is that the people that I saw as these heroes when I started the study, towards the end, were all just normal folks who were in sort of weird situations where they were forced to discover new things. And I say forced to discover new things explicitly because I don't think invention is something that people do willingly. And I think that's okay. But at least the folks that I studied, none of them would have preferred the path that they'd taken if another path had been available. They would have taken that, but they were forced because of circumstance, or in some cases laws, in some cases biases, in some cases Nazis. There were barriers that they had to surmount, and they became inventors as a last resort, and then they became wildly successful. So I thought that was an interesting topic. So that's what the book's about, and how we can become these people. That's sort of the fun part.
Go back for a second, just talk about the name, because you hit on something that is kind of interesting for folks to know. I think you originally Fair and Square. Why Fair and Square? I mean, I know why, but explain what Square was doing other than just making it easy to take a credit card payment.
So if you were a small merchant and you were one of the lucky ones who could accept credit cards, 10 years ago, then you would pay this huge rate. And it was so large that the profit margin on small businesses was 45 times larger than the profit margin on large businesses. And I will be clear. I said 45, not 425. So that's like nearly 50 times as much profit came in from the small merchants because they were just getting killed. And that was if you could accept credit cards. Most small merchants couldn't. So what Square did was basically two things. One, we opened up the world to millions of small merchants who wanted to accept credit cards and probably would have paid anything to have that privilege. But instead of making them pay anything, we took their rates down to, basically the lowest in the market. So we gave them the pricing that stores like, Target and Walmart were enjoying, and we gave that to everybody.
Can I just insert? I just want to put a finer point, just because I'm not a preacher or a moralizer at all, but I just do find it morally so disgusting, the statistic you just gave. And it is deeply disturbing to know that's how things were for so long, that here's Target and Walmart, and here's Susie's Cafe down the street. I do find that just quite objectionable. Sorry to interrupt.
I mean, you can find it objectionable, and we can have that conversation. But it's the market, okay? So it wasn't like there was some evil person sitting there saying we will make this market unfair to small merchants. What you had were massive economies of scales. So Walmart can negotiate with Visa and MasterCard and the banks, and they can get their processing costs way down because they're Walmart, for God's sake, and they can go someplace else if you don't give them the best rate in the world. And small merchants couldn't do that, and small merchants had to take what they were offered, which at the time was pretty paltry. And so this is the pattern that I saw when I was researching the book, because the book's not just about Square; it's about all these other companies that basically did the same thing. And probably the best example that I found was Southwest Airlines, which took this sort of commoditized product, which was air travel, and they delivered it for about a quarter the cost of the other airlines. So the other competing airlines were charging 4 times as much to take you from the same city that Southwest was taking you and delivering you to the same place. And that just seemed amazing to me because, they were all flying Boeing 737s and they were all, passing the same FAA inspections. And it just seemed like that shouldn't be possible. But it turns out that the way the economy works, it usually creates this massive inequity down at the bottom of the market. And you see it everywhere, from diapers to healthcare to cars to just down at the bottom of the market are poor people who are actually paying more. I think it should be stopped, but the way to stop it, I think, is to build a company that, massively serves that market, and that turns out to be pretty good if you're the person building the company too.
Indeed, and I like what you write about Southwest. Herb Kelleher, and I'm just going to read a paragraph from the book here, which is it's chapter 9, in case anybody is listening and wants to go to it. So, Herb, you're writing about the founder. Herb was legendary, and flying Southwest down to the airline's Dallas headquarters made the legend loom larger. The airport itself is on Herb Kelleher Way. I walked into Southwest's lobby and saw a giant monitor with the airline's current on-time performance. Then I noticed something odd. The central time zone had been renamed Herb Time. Even after... That's where you should chuckle. Even after a decade of retirement, Herb got his own time zone and a special executive suite at headquarters. And you go on to write about all of his memorabilia in the trophy case. But for, I'm quoting again here, for every formal award, there are a dozen homemade gifts from Southwest employees and customers, mostly heart-shaped in honor of the corporate logo. What did he do so right other than fly sort of for cheap?
He made it possible to visit your grandmother. Like, he made it possible for you to go get health care at a decent facility. If you live out in rural Texas, you could fly to you could fly to Dallas and get chemo. He made it possible for the world to travel, and they thought he was an idiot at the beginning. Like, people ridiculed Southwest for trying to fly normal people, because the government had done a study and the government had concluded that only rich people and business people wanted to fly. And you know how they got that data? They basically surveyed all the people on the airlines, in the 60s and 70s. Well, the planes were so expensive that only rich people and business people could fly. So sure enough, that's what their survey told them. And Herb thought this was insane. He thought that normal people would like to be able to travel in, the comfort and safety of an airline, and so they built Southwest to do that. And in doing so, they built an innovation stack, which is to say they did not one or two or three things different, but in Southwest's case, they did about 25 things that the major airlines didn't do. And the combination of those things gave them such a massive advantage that they were able to, for 20 years be the low-cost leader in air travel, and they were able to enable literally tens of millions of people to travel for the first time using an airplane.
What is a perfect problem? What is something that jumps out at you? You probably have a list written down or a list in your head. What is a really perfect problem? Let's go into that a little bit more.
So that's an interesting thing, Daniel, because you don't know when you're starting if what you're trying to do can be done, or if it's something that maybe somebody else could do, but you can't. So when I look at a problem, I find a problem, I think, well, that's interesting, I'd like to solve it. The first thing I assume is I'm not that unique. There are billions of other people. Somebody's figured this out. I just have to find out who's had this problem and solved it. And so that usually involves a bunch of research, and I almost always find somebody who's solved the problem. Sometimes I don't find that solution. And then I have to ask myself, okay, am I willing to do what it takes to try to solve this problem, even though I don't get to copy the solution? And you don't know if it's a perfect problem, because a perfect problem, at least by my definition, is something that you can solve. But the way you pursue that solution is you try something. Well, maybe that thing kind of works, or maybe it doesn't work, but then you try something else and that kind of works, but then that causes two other problems. So you got to solve those problems too. And you go and you go and you go, and at some point you either solve the original problem or you don't. Now this can take, weeks or months, or in Square's case, it took a year and a half. But after a year and a half, we figured out how to do it. We were doing 14 things that the market had never seen before, because we had to, not because we wanted to. We weren't trying to be different. We were just trying to do this thing that seemed simple, which is, give credit cards to small merchants, or credit card processing to small merchants. But it turned out to be really tough. And once you solve it, then you've found a perfect problem. But of course, it's no longer a perfect problem because it's solved, and who cares? So it's really interesting, because your question, I think, contains sort of a sub-question, or maybe an inference, which is, please, Jim, tell me what I can and can't do. Please tell me some formula that'll let me know if I'm capable of doing this or if it's impossible. And there's no such formula that I know of. And we're so used to having guarantees. We're so used to saying, oh, well, I'm going to do this, but only once I've been trained and once I've been certified and once I have, the credentials so that I know I'm almost assured of success. And in the world of invention, you don't get that assurance.
I understand well there are no guarantees and no assurances, and I certainly am not looking for a possibility of inventing the next Square. I'll leave that.
Well, you might. I mean, you may well. I mean, you had absolutely as much credentials in starting a company like Square as I did when I started it. I mean,
well, okay. So that be that as it may, probably not true. But I thanks for that. What I'm going to ask you a different question. Come at it from a different angle. What are you working on other than whiskey glasses?
Whiskey glasses right now.
Yeah. What keeps you? What keeps you up at night? What are you trying to do in a big way or a small way that you haven't done yet? I mean,
So I think there's a real problem with personal identity and how our online selves are represented. And we basically exist as these files and servers on Google and Facebook's clouds, where they have this representation of us, and they're selling us because it's in their possession and not in ours. And it's our data, and it's essentially more and more of who we are. And I think that's a huge societal problem. And I've been working for 4 years to try to figure out a way to get people back in charge of their identities. So I came up with what I thought was a theoretical solution about 5 years ago. And I've been working on it with a dedicated team of people here at Invisibly to try to build something that allows you to take control back. It kind of works. I wouldn't say go to invisibly.com right now and, download it and try, yeah. I mean, try if you want to. It doesn't really work yet. Okay. Don't, but we're working on it. And again, I don't know if we can do it. Like it's not been done. It might not be doable, or maybe we're not the right people to do it, but I think we're making some progress, and hopefully that'll be meaningful. And then the other thing I'm working on is, it's honestly a super low cost diaper. It turns out a lot of about a third of Americans can't afford diapers, or they are very stressed to afford diapers when they become parents. And
how much is a pack of diapers?
A diaper is about 25 cents a poop. That's what you can pay.
And how many come in a pack usually?
Well, it depends on how rich you are, right? So the rich person buys a pack of 60, and the poor person buys a pack of 3 or 5 or 1.
Wow.
And so if you're poor,
Wow.
It's not 25 cents. It's more like 50 or 60 cents per diaper. And I think we should be able to take 90% of that cost out. Like I want to make a diaper for a nickel, and still have a functioning, ecologically responsible diaper. Because look, if you don't, and like most of us, well, I don't say most of us, a lot of us live above this level where we see these problems. But poverty kind of starts when a person has to take care of a child. Like you can be really poor, and I've had periods of my life when I didn't have much money, and it doesn't matter because you're alone. Who cares? But like if you're poor and you have to take care of an infant, well, now you got massive problems because you've got the daycares won't take you unless you can provide diapers. So I really think that's an interesting problem. Now, can I do it? I don't know. We're working on it. But those are some things that I'm currently thinking about.
It's very interesting. You're sort of talking about the betterment of society in a way, and it's moving to me because on the one hand there's this idea that we have this enormous amount of data just swirling around in the cloud, and anybody who uses the internet, I suppose, is part of it, and it's sort of inevitable that you get sucked in, and that's that. And then on the other hand, here's poor people who can't afford a diaper, and no one would argue that an individual being able to have a little more control over their data is a bad thing, and no one would argue that poor people being able to give their kid a diaper is a bad thing. So it's betterment. I hope it works out, both of those, and I certainly would be very interested in getting back more of my digital identity. But don't you feel, Jim, that I don't know? Are we? I guess you don't feel that way. I was going to say, is it too late? You must not think it is, but we are really, really far down this road.
Well, we are and we aren't, right? Ultimately, I think you're looking at competing economic systems, right? So I'm an economist as well. So I always sort of nerd out and think, well, is one system better than another, right? And will capitalism always beat communism or socialism? And the answer is, not always. It depends on how you play the games. And is capitalism probably the best thing we got? Yeah, I think it is. But is there some way to come up with a different set of solutions? And I think there is. So here's the simple math of your eyeballs. Okay, when you watch or consume a piece of content online, the way that's paid for is by selling you ads. Now, sometimes you'll have a subscription, so we subscribe to Netflix or something, and sometimes we pay, do pay-per-view, but generally you are paying for your content with your attention, which is to say you give your attention freely to this platform that sells part of it to advertisers to pay for the stuff that you want, and then gives you the stuff that you want. And that's how Facebook works, and that's how Google works, and that's basically how the entire ad-supported ecosystem works. But it's a bad trade, and it's a bad trade for a couple of reasons. One, it's hugely inefficient. So your eyeballs are being sold in ways that are insultingly cheap. Like you would be just angry if I told you how cheap your attention is, but it's like fractions of a cent per minute in some cases. And you sit there and say, well, wait a second, I've got perfect pitch and I'm a badass, highly skilled person. Like, why am I working for 50 cents an hour nominal wage? And the answer is, well, that's how the game is played, right? And you sit there and say, well, wait a second, my time's worth more than that. If I could buy back all the time I waste being distracted and interrupted for $5 a month, would you buy it? And the answer is, well, some cases yes, in some cases no. So but even if you don't want to pay with money, we could make it just more efficient. We could allow you to say, hey, look, I'm not going to ever buy a pickup truck, so stop advertising Ford F-150s to me. But I might be able to use a minivan. So why don't you show me some of those ads? So individuals who take control will whoppingly increase the efficiency of the system. Now, the question is, can we take that efficiency and pay back all the stakeholders so that they're all better off and the system works economically? Or are you going to get blocked at some level? And that's what we're struggling with right now.
It may be a naive question to ask, but why isn't there an option on Facebook or other social media or even websites to pay a little more per month or per year or whatever and have the ads stop, have a different level of service in exchange for a small fee? And I'm just thinking even about the newspapers. I have a New York Times subscription. So why am I still being fed so many? I was reading a long article this morning in the New York Times, and every other paragraph there's an ad, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I'm fine to scroll, but I would rather not have to scroll past whatever so often. And here I am, a paying subscriber. Why don't they sell me a little more? I'll pay double, or pay $5 more, or whatever, and have no ads. Why is this not an option?
So in your case, the New York Times could actually do that. They have the power to do that because they have you as a subscriber. And they can sit there and say, well, level 1 subscription with ads and level 2 subscription with no ads. And that would be very easy for them to offer.
Isn't that a good idea, though?
It is. The problem is that most of the Western world doesn't support print subscriptions. As a matter of fact, there are only 5 that make money: New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and The Economist. And if it's not one of those 5 that I just named, they make their money through ads, not through subscriptions. Now, they may have subscriptions, but they don't support the content through the subscriptions. They support it through ads. So if you're not one of those 5 papers or publications, then the only thing you can do is sell advertising space. And the problem with that is that you then have no way of giving a good experience to an occasional reader. So, for instance, if you read something in The Atlantic, well, you don't subscribe to The Atlantic, but maybe you read 3 articles a year there. All right, well, The Atlantic should get paid for those 3 articles, but how are they going to do that? Well, the answer is not through advertising, because advertising is so woefully inefficient that they don't make enough money to do it. As a result, we're basically losing journalism. We're losing people who are paid to create great content. And I think this is a tragedy for the world. So this is what I'm trying to work on. And I think there's plenty of money out there. So there are plenty of people like yourself who would sit there and say, hey, look, an extra 4 cents to have a better experience? Sure. And if you could just efficiently get 4 cents to the right people, it would work. The problem is there are no rails to transmit 4 cents efficiently in the world. There are just none. And, it's not blockchain and it's not Bitcoin. There's no efficient way for me to move, pennies or fractions of a penny around. So Invisibly has sort of the template for something, but we have to get everybody on board and transacting first, and then I can build a payment system. Trust me on that.
Today's March 18th. Should I buy some Bitcoin today, right now?
Oh man, I don't get into that stuff.
Okay.
I mean, Jack's really into Bitcoin. I'm really not. I I respect it, and I like a lot of the tech, but I think it's sort of an environmental disaster, because you're spending
Why?
massive amounts of energy to mine and verify the blockchain. Um, it's it's using the electrical consumption of a small country right now, and it's going to keep growing. So it's hugely wasteful environmentally, and it's also, to me, something that I think governments are going to not like. And that's the thing that always bothers me when I think about, well, what will governments do? And the answer is they haven't done anything yet. And maybe the answer is, well, they'll never do anything. But I think they're going to start. And when that starts, I don't know what's going to happen. So, but that said, I have a lot of really smart friends who are um, super positive on crypto. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that there's some questions that I haven't figured out how to answer yet.
Fairly put. I appreciate that. Uh, look, a big part of what I do on this show, as you know, is talk about the intersection of music and the arts and the humanities with all sorts of stuff. I mean, last week Walter Isaacson was on for his second time,
He's
and
fantastic. God, yeah.
he's absolutely incredible, and that's what he's all about is connecting science and the humanities, and the geniuses that he writes about from Einstein to Da Vinci are sort of sitting at the crossroads of all that. And Da Vinci is sort of the genius of all time, according to Walter, and he makes a pretty good case for it, given his genius in the sciences and in the arts, and how he brought them together in the Vitruvian Man. Speaking of a maestro, I like this in your book. I'm bringing it back here to this wonderful man who has a great name, by the way, and I know how to pronounce it because I went to high school in Rome. Lino Tagliapietra.
Yes, Lino.
And so what I love that in a book about, well, it's a book about ideas, but you're an inventor and a businessman, etc. Here we have the maestro's lesson, the glass blower. Who is this? Why do you write about this guy?
So Lino is widely considered to be the best glass blower in the world. And if you're a glass blower, as I am, you respect and idolize Lino. And so I learned a lesson from him in a class that he taught. This was, about 20 years ago, I guess. I had been blowing glass for 15 years at the time I took his class, and I learned a lesson that really stuck with me throughout my life on timing. I was trying to make something, and Lino's class is interesting because you're only allowed to ask one question. Like, so you're studying with this guy for 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks you get to ask him one question, right? Which is a great way to teach the class because it focuses your attention on asking a really good question. And so
so is it to describe the class a little more in detail? Are you sitting around in a circle? Is he on a big podium?
No, you're in a secluded camp in Maine, and there's a glass blowing studio with a bunch of furnaces, and the maestro does demonstrations in the morning, and then you have open work times in the afternoon, and then you make things, and he sometimes critiques, but you're also allowed to ask your one question. And so the question is a big deal, and most of the students always ask these very complicated questions so that they don't waste a minute of the maestro's genius. But when I asked my question, nobody really even paid attention because I asked him such a basic question that everybody knew the answer. I asked the world's best glassblower how to put a foot on a bowl, right? That's something we teach in week 1, okay? And I'd been blowing glass for 15 years at the time. So it was something that I knew how to do, but I could never get comfortable with it. Like, I was always nervous. And sometimes they'd work and sometimes they wouldn't work, and I couldn't figure it out. So I wasted my question, or I thought I was going to waste my question, just asking this really simple thing of the maestro. And what happened was interesting because, normally when he answers these questions, he'll do a demonstration. He'll show you what to do. And that's not what he did. In my case, he said, well, make a bowl. And I made a bowl. And he says, okay, make a foot. And I made a foot. So I got the foot in my right hand, bowl in my left hand. And he says, put the foot on the bowl, right? So I'm just about to join the two pieces of glass together. And he says, wait. And then he said, now. And just that moment's hesitation allowed the glass that was in my right hand to cool down just slightly to a different temperature. And at that temperature, it went on perfectly. And what I realized was that I had been using the same technique, using the correct technique for a decade, but I was ignoring when to use the right technique. So I knew how, but I didn't know when. And so that was the lesson that Lino taught me. And as soon as I saw it in the glass studio, I went around the rest of my life and I was like, oh my God, I just saw so many examples of me doing the right thing at the wrong time. And so since then, I've become this student of timing, know what to do, but also know when to do it. And most people never are taught when. Like, we're not taught when in school. You're taught, math in school. Well, when's the good time to use math? Like, when is it appropriate to, or you're taught law, and when is it an appropriate time to, depend on the law as opposed to other stuff? Yeah, just timing is so important, and I never thought about that until Lino showed me.
It's fascinating. Just like in music, the same way a comedian will tell you that if you wait a split second or you use a 3-syllable word instead of 2, you could ruin the joke or make the joke. Same thing in music when you're playing a musical phrase. If the timing is just right, we talk about the Italian word rubato, which actually means stolen, but in music, what rubato means is a flexibility of the time, meaning you take some time and then you give it back. And the flexibility, the fluidity, where if the timing is so artfully done, the thing we go for in our head when we have that perfect idea of the phrase in our head and we try to transmit it through the hands, if the timing is done so well, the listener doesn't even really know why they're so moved. They don't know why it was so good. You don't want to ram it down their throat. You want it to be subtle, that they hear the art behind it, and they're not saying, that was a big slowdown, then a big speed up he made.
Yeah. And
it should go smooth.
Yeah, and what you said earlier about playing these century-old works, that's not in the scores, right? You read the scores, there's some very gross direction as to how the composer intended, but you have to figure it out and you have to interpret it. And I mean, if you listen to, I know pianists well, but if you listen to Alfred Brendel play Beethoven, like, he just figures stuff out. I was listening to Horowitz play yesterday, and I was realizing that this guy could take a score that I've heard 100 times and make it sound so much more interesting. And he was doing all these little things. He was interpreting the music, and I think that's why we love live music. I think that's why we respect great performers, and it's not because they can hit the notes. It's because they can, just back off the note just a thousandth of a second, and then jam down on the next one. And occasionally, like, they can bring stuff out of the music. I remember when I was obsessively practicing this Beethoven piece. Okay, so I'm not a very good pianist, right? So the way I learn is by just grinding through the same stanzas again and again and again and again and again. I just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and until it becomes, sort of pure muscle memory that my fingers hit the right keys. And as I was grinding through this one section, I probably played it, 200 times. And all of a sudden, on probably the 215th repetition, I heard a different melody. I heard a melody that Beethoven buried into these notes, and it was like, oh my God, that's it. And I was like, God, I was alone because nobody can stand you when you're practicing like this. I was, sitting there in a student, one of those anechoic booths that they have at colleges and stuff. But I was like, oh my God, that's Beethoven hid this little melody inside these, there were 16th notes, so they're fast stuff. But it was in there, and it took me 200 listens to hear it. Now, a real musician could probably bring that out, and they just recognize that it's there. But for me, a hacker, I got to do it hundreds of times.
I love that, and I love your passion for music. I actually had no idea about your passion for music, and not a lot of people in your position are sitting around listening to Horowitz or Brendel.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you do. Brendel well, he's retired. He was a wonderful pianist, and Horowitz. For anybody listening, I encourage you just to go to YouTube and live through the ads, whatever. If you have to, just type in Vladimir Horowitz or just Horowitz and watch some video. It doesn't matter what. It'll be truly a joyful experience, and especially there's a video of his Carnegie Hall recital late in life. I'm sure you've seen it a lot. It's just unbelievable. So, a quick little story about the Moonlight Sonata, by the way. So when you were in music school, you have to study a little bit of piano, a couple of years, pass the tests. So I was always a bad pianist. I love piano, but I always had problems just playing the piano. I thought, God, you're really not very talented at piano, but I had to do it anyway. So I was playing the Moonlight Sonata slowly and gingerly, and it's such a beautiful piece. I said, God, you're really not doing any justice, but this is the one you're going to play. So fast forward to the jury, which is, you play some scales and you play a piece. They had assigned within 24 hours a new piece that you had to learn quickly, and then your sort of repertoire piece. So mine was the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata, and I go into the jury expecting that it would just be my teacher, who was a graduate student, and a few other graduate students sitting around to grade you. Okay. I walk in the room, and Menachem Pressler is there.
Oh, my God.
who had, as you know, one of the great pianists of the world, the pianist of the Beaux-Arts trio, and just one of the great musical figures, period. And he had been my chamber music coach. I played the Trout Quintet. I played Schumann pieces, the Brahms quartets and stuff, coached by him. I go in there, I sit at the keyboard, and I look, just to make sure it was really him. I say, that is him, and I'm going to play piano from what the hell is happening here? Let's just say it's a good thing I stick to cello. It didn't make me a better pianist to have Menachem Pressler listening to me fumble through the Moonlight Sonata.
Wow. Wow. One of the, yeah.
So, look, I know we don't have unlimited time, Jim McKelvey, and I wish we did, because you're just a real treat to talk to, and a pleasure. We've been through a lot. The world's been through a lot. What do you think we need to be doing the next 6-8 months, next couple of years? What should we be doing? One thing I always talk about is people coming to the things that give them richness in life, that add emotional content. That's why I'm always after waving the banner for music, because I do think music, I don't think it's a cliche, I do think music actually solves problems. I've seen it all over the world. And so my whole thing is I want people to listen. I want to invite them to listen. Any kind of music that moves them. And so that's what I'm doing on this show and in other venues as well. What do you want to do?
So I guess, in the next 6 to 8 months, the world's going to open up again. I just had a meeting with the Fed this morning, and the economic data is very good. February was down a little bit, but they expect that was mostly weather. So things are looking good. Okay. And the next 6 to 8 months, get your vaccine if you can. But then the thing that I would say is you've been given this wonderful opportunity, because over the last year, your life has gotten compressed. Like the things you used to do have changed, and you have new habits, you have new efficiencies. Like you're able to do things in some ways better than you could before. I mean, I think, sometimes you would have to fly to a meeting. Now you can Zoom to a meeting. Sometimes you would have to, attend something, and now you don't have to attend. Like your life has been sort of changed by the pandemic, and recognize those areas where you might want to steal that time and put it to something else. So the reason I learned to play the piano was because I one day decided to get rid of all the stuff in my life that wasn't helping, and I got rid of my TV. Okay. And so I'd come home at night, and normally I would watch TV to unwind, but I didn't have a TV anymore. So I started reading, and there's only so much you can read. And I was like so bored with reading. And then I said, well, I wonder if I could learn to play the piano. Right. So I decided it would be fun to learn how to play the third movement of the Moonlight because, everybody learns how to play the first movement, which is fairly easy, and nobody can play the third movement, which is like insanely difficult. And I thought just sort of as a joke, I'd learn the third. But that time, like the hundreds and hundreds of hours that I put into that came from television, So, and I don't regret that for a second. As a matter of fact, it was life-changingly positive. And so I would say that all of us have been through this really unpleasant 12 months of contraction. And our lives have been compressed and we didn't socialize as much. Like there's all this stuff you're going to want to do. But instead of just absent-mindedly letting your time get filled back up for you, maybe choose to keep a few things super compressed and use that time for something else. Like I'm looking forward now to, having my life back, but also having better control over, some of the stuff that I don't want to do. So like this morning, I phoned into a Fed meeting, whereas normally I had driven down to the bank, and checked in and all that stuff. And you know what? All I did was vote on an interest rate. You can do that on the phone. Like you can just do that on the phone. Why not do that on the phone? Okay, fine.
Will you play duets with me sometime?
I can't. I suck. Like I can play one decent thing on the piano, and I basically, since I got married, I've stopped practicing regularly, so I can barely get through it. But I would love. It would be a great honor if I could.
Jim McKelvey, we're talking about lots of things, including this marvelous, entertaining book, The Innovation Stack. And it's a pleasure to talk to you. I thank you.
Daniel, what a pleasure. This has been so much fun.
You've been listening to Talking Beats with Daniel Elchuk. The original theme music is by Ronald Barkham. The content coordinator is Nathaniel Mosey, and Doug Christian is executive producer. We invite you to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can support us at patreon.com/talkingbeats. That's patreon.com/talkingbeats. And be sure to check us out on social media. We'll see you next time on Talking Beats with Daniel Elchuk.